had a pistol in my hand at the time. I was really ticked off. When I was having this fit, I was waving the gun in the air, okay, and I had this fit. And at this moment, I said, okay.
He was a Louisiana man named Montaldo. Folks around called him Six Gun Joe. Works with ICAR, don't you know? Investigating UFOs. Out for a drive with a gal one night, they stopped to check out the reporting site. When an alien lit right there on the ground, commenced to throwing his weight around. Now, old Six Gun didn't take too kindly to that kind of thing, especially without Vaseline around, you know. Seriously. Well, Six Gun looked that critter right in the eye and said, any last wish before you die, yo? Reached for his gun, quick as a twitch, and said, fill your claw, you son of a bitch. Now a legend spread across the land about this pistol-waving man. But if you're from space or from Earth below, you don't give no lip to Six Gun Joe.
Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of UFO Undercover. I hope everyone's having a great evening, great morning, great afternoon, wherever you are on our beautiful blue planet. And I say this every week. I love doing the show every Wednesday night. We're up to 1.5 million weekly listeners now. It's just a fabulous place to come hang out and state our opinions, gripe, bitch, moan, complain, and generally wreak havoc on ufology, which is fun in itself. No, I'm just kidding. Before y'all start writing me emails, I was just kidding. Before I introduce both our guests tonight, one quick little note. Linda, this afternoon tells me, come look at the sky. Beautiful sunset out of my front window. And I live in the city, too, which is rare to see this pretty of a sunset in the city. So I was out filming the sunset, and lo and behold, if there's not a little white light that turned into a little orange light, that turned into a little red light, that just sat and drifted across the sky for 15, 20 minutes, turned back into a brilliant white light. And then these little things started shooting off the side of it and doing curlicues. Got it all on videotape, by the way. So as soon as the show's over tonight, I'm going to post that to Facebook. Tonight's guests are Richard Dolan and Steven Bassett. Most of my audience should be familiar with both of them. We're going to be discussing tonight because, frankly, both these guys are working hard on getting some sort of disclosure. You know, Steven did good. He got us recognized on the first petition with, I think it was 15,000 votes, and that's a good step. Now I see they bumped it up to 25,000, if I'm correct. And guys, first off, I haven't seen the participation in either one of these petitions that I should see. I mean, this is a huge field. I mean, we're not talking, 50 or 60 people. There's several million people alone in the United States that have an interest in this, much less worldwide. So frankly, I'm just, for lack of a better way of saying it, not seeing the love, not feeling the love here, guys and girls. Go over there, sign the Fed. They're not going to come to your house and take you, I promise you. Okay, they're not even interested in your little name, but they do want you to sign up. But anyway, on that note, that's enough. So, Richard, Steven, welcome to the show.
Hi, Joe. Thanks. Glad to be on.
Yeah, happy to be with you, Joe.
So it's always great to have both of you on. I don't think I've ever done an interview with both of you at the same time before, which is kind of strange. Now, I'm going to start out with Steven. So, Steven, what possessed you to do the second position? Was it the answer from the government gave us on the first one?
Well, this whole thing has been planned out from the beginning. We're not making this up as we go along. The White House initiated a petition process on September the 22nd. This has never really been done before that I am aware of. They did something kind of like it during their transition before the inauguration on a site called change.gov, but nothing. This is a sitting president. So it opened up a very interesting strategic opportunity, which they may or may not have understood that they were doing that. This though I didn't know that. In any event, send us a petition, get 150 signatures, we'll publish it, get 5,000 in 30 days, we'll respond to it. Fine. The two petitions went up immediately after they opened. One was by Paradigm Research Group, the disclosure petition, and another one was backed primarily by Robert Salas, which addressed the witness issues and having them investigate witnesses. So they were similar, but the PRG petition was called the disclosure petition. And my job is to drive this process. And so I put a great deal of time and used my network. And that petition got the necessary 5,000 signatures in 4 days and ended up getting a total of 12,000. Now, that meant that it would get a response from the White House. As it happened, the White House has tapped into something very powerful. American people really would like to have the government listen to them and respond to them. And this is an election year coming up. It's good politics. So they got 10,000 petitions almost from the get-go. Only about 300 achieved 150 signatures and were posted, but they didn't know that. So they kind of panicked and raised the threshold from 5,000 to 25,000 signatures in 30 days in order to get a response, but it wasn't retroactive. All well and good. Now, we got a response. It came on November the 4th. And of course, that's what we wanted. A lot of people said, wait a minute, Steve, you're supposed to have gotten disclosure. Isn't that what you asked for? Well, yeah, we did, but that's not the point. We got the response. Now, this is a major milestone in the 65-year history of this whole thing in the modern era. It is the first time that the executive branch of the United States government has ever put a formal statement in writing on their position on this. It's never happened before. They've been able to avoid having to deal with this by not having that, by not having to respond, by ducking and weaving and dodging and referring and whatever. And so the moment they put out that formal position on November the 4th, written by a researcher in the Office of Science and Technology Policy and signed off on by the science advisor and the head of the OSTP, Dr. John Holdren, they created a fixed target, a fixed position that they cannot simply ignore or run away from. That was the whole point of this petition process from the beginning. Now, we got that statement, and then what happened is we waited about three weeks and then initiated a second petition process. The Paradigm Research Group launched Disclosure Petition 2, the Rockefeller Initiative, and Richard, and he'll talk about this, and Bryce Dolan launched a petition that was called the Need to Know petition at the same time. Now, this time around, they needed 25,000 signatures to get that response. So the bar was substantially raised, but that's okay. The key factor in getting the number of signatures, among other things, is the number of people in the United States that know about the We the People section on the White House. Not that many knew about it. They did not promote this heavily. They did not do any splash stuff. They just mentioned it on the site. The president has never mentioned it in any of his press conferences. And I think the reason for that is they knew they didn't know what to expect. And if they ran out of the gate too fast, they might have been buried in petitions, 30, 40, 50,000. So they've low-keyed it. So the problem, even though there's tens of millions of people in this country that would like to address this issue and like to have the truth, they didn't even know that this was going up there. And so this second round, right, was to take advantage of the fact that over 1.5 million people had been opened an account. They knew about it. The number was going to grow, and there was a realistic chance of getting 25,000 signatures. But it didn't quite work out that way. And I'll pass this to Richard now to kind of tell you what happened after our two petitions went up on December the 1st.
Sure. Well, Bryce Zabel and I, Bryce is, of course, my co-author of the book AD After Disclosure. This is our attempt to foresee a world in which UFO secrecy has ended, and trying to understand all of its implications. We've continued to work together since the publication of that book a year ago. And we're very intrigued by Steve's initial petition, which really I think did quite well. Let's face it, you get 12,000 signatures. It's really very remarkable. With the second petition coming out, and Steve had let us know about this, it wasn't so much that we didn't care for your petition, Steve. Actually, I thought it was kind of a really good idea. But we also thought it would be a nice idea to toss out another petition. After all, there were two petitions out the first time. And we wanted to make a little more of a general statement regarding the UFO topic and the need for an open, transparent investigation of it, without really implying an answer to it one way or the other, without demanding that the White House state that they were extraterrestrial, for example, or anything of this particular sort. So we had not expected, even a week before we went up with this, we were not expecting to create another petition, but Bryce and I ended up drafting it. And once we were satisfied with it, we thought, let's just put it out there. Now, the thing was, with a bar of 25,000, I can tell you that I, at least myself, did not have a particular optimistic feeling that we were likely to hit 25,000. In fact, I really felt that just based on previous, the previous petitions, that we were going to have a tough nut to crack. But it was worth it to give it a shot, and I'm very glad that we did. The fact that the Obama administration raised their bar from 5,000 to 25,000 almost immediately, and really it has to be suspected that they did this explicitly, Steve, because of the success of your petition, that they did, in fact, stated initially that they wanted public input, but you really have to wonder how sincere this desire was and how much public input they actually want. I think my assessment is that this is pure PR on their part, that they do not. I mean, we've moved into an era increasingly in which the U.S. government does not wish anything more than the most perfunctory public participation. I think we're seeing this very clearly. This is a long-standing trend. It's not just Obama. And they didn't really want to deal with UFOs. Of course they don't want to deal with the UFO issue. So they raised the bar to 25,000, which is very difficult. On top of that, of course, for most of this month, we've been dealing with complaints from people who have tried and failed repeatedly to try to register, to cast their vote for the petition. Now, we have no idea how many thousands of votes we have lost in the process, simply because the White House website has been so snarled up and so user unfriendly in terms of not allowing people to log on. So when you look at all of these obstacles that they've thrown in front of us, my own opinion is that really they're not interested, not in the least, in true public participation. And what they've done is simply posturing. Now, I think it's great that we have this tool and we can still use it to our benefit, but I think to expect anything other than the most, bland denials, which is it's not going to happen until they are forced. There will be a day, I think, when they're forced into a true statement, but it's only when they are pushed right to the wall. I don't see them really making a statement. For example, their answer to PRG's first petition was really rather silly. All you have to do is just look at the basic history of the UFO phenomenon in the United States, the long history of military encounters, the history of declassified documents that show this is a clear national security issue to high levels of the U.S. system. So that their answer that, well, there's no evidence that UFOs represent anything unusual or that there's any cover-up. It's nonsense. And that's all we're going to get out of them until they are forced. Public pressure is one thing, but I think really on top of that, we're going to need major events that are going to leak out and become an uncontrollable nightmare for them in terms of PR.
I think we need some ET pressure. It's interesting you brought that up about the petition, because I was getting ready to ask y'all both this. Just before I called y'all on the phone, my French director writes to me and she said, well, what, other countries aren't allowed to sign the petition? I said, really? I thought everyone could sign the petition. I didn't see anywhere that it stated you had to be a U.S. citizen, which it may be. I don't know, because it is, after all, a government site. But, so when she did that, I put out a general email to my mailing list to ask if anybody had any problems. I almost had 75 people respond to me in 15 minutes. Said, yeah, we couldn't sign the petition, either one.
Right.
Right.
So I found that just great.
Yeah, let me give another perspective. Richard is given one. Let me come at it from a different angle. The petitions really went nowhere, but none of the other ones did as well. The site broke down for who knows why. What they're doing there is substantial, but it's very common in the commercial world, like Amazon and any number of other accounts that we have. You open an account, you get an email back with a password and a verification link. You click on the verification link, then use the password, log in, do your business. Now, these commercial operations like Amazon spend a great deal of money to make it perfect, and it has to be perfect. Otherwise, they lose a lot of business. They pay their IT people a lot of money. The White House is not a commercial operation. I think we can say they don't pay their IT people or have as many as some of these big operations, commercial operations. And so they were trying to set up something that was going to handle millions of accounts ultimately, and they just didn't get it right. They probably tried to make some changes and it broke down. So what happened was that starting right around the time that we submitted the two petitions, around December the 1st, a little suspicious, but I'm going to give them a little room here to maneuver. It just broke down. So we got scores of email back saying we can't open an account, or the account doesn't work anymore, we can't sign, can't log in. They're very angry, they're upset, they try for days, and they give it up. So whereas the first petition just went right out the door and had 5,000 signatures in 4 days, 29 days into, or 28 days into this second round, the disclosure petition 2 only has 900 signatures. Right. So the site, all the petitions were affected, and every petition that was submitted virtually. Listen
to what you're saying, Steve. I mean, you're saying it's not as important for the White House because whereas for Amazon, it really matters, and for the White House, it really doesn't matter as much. So in other words, really the democratic process and democratic input from the public is not as important to the White House as Amazon's process is for its business, which is absolutely true. But the larger issue is we're seeing a symptom of a government that has not really put the effort into the necessary effort into an IT structure that is sufficient for public interaction. And the reason is that because it's not that important to them. I think it's totally consistent with the fact that they have raised the bar, I think ridiculously, from 5,000 to 25,000. And I think they did it very blatantly in response, frankly, to the initial success of your first petition.
I would love to think that. I would love to think that, Richard, but because
they don't want to respond to one UFO petition after another. They don't want to do that. They absolutely want to run far and faster.
If in fact they've made a miscalculation, you could be right. I mean, we had two disclosure petitions.
Why would they have raised the bar by a factor of 5?
Well, I guess that the explanation that would be, quote, non-conspiratorial would be that, and I know this, these are facts that I'm giving you. Within 2 weeks, they had gotten 10,000. That was confirmed by, like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal had actually interviewed them. And the fact was, if the 5,000 bar was too low, it was conceivable that they could end up having to respond to like 1,000, 2,000 petitions, which would have been a problem for them. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they said, my God, we set the bar too low. We've got to jack it up. And so they jacked it up a little too high. And as a result, they pretty much kind of really reduced the prospect of any more hitting the bar right now, clearing that threshold right now. And then, of course, the site breaks down. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. All right, because you're right.
We could give the benefit of the doubt. I'm just saying, in the perspective of the long term, with this and previous U.S. administrations, the trend has been toward less, not greater, public participation in the process. That's my take on it.
But they did create
this as a part of.
But they did create this.
They created the site, but then they created it, and then they basically retreated from it almost immediately.
But now we have
too much participation, too much people. We're going to have you participate a little bit less. Thank you.
Now, here's what Joe's listeners need to know, Richard. Now, you and Bryce have decided not to submit at this point your petition. Maybe you're going to come up with a new one later in the year, see what happens, and that's fine.
Well, I think that's very likely that we will. But right at this time, he and I have decided. Look, we're not in this to do a series of petitions. I think that we are likely to do another petition, very likely in the springtime. Think this through and really plan it out and see what happens then.
All right. What we're going to do now, what this Paradigm Research Group is going to do now, is test the White House intentions here. Now, I contacted the White House. I contacted the OSTP. I talked with a staffer who confirmed that they had a lot of site problems. The site was down for maintenance repeatedly. People couldn't sign, and they're fixing this. Okay, fine. All right. So the disclosure petition 2, the Rockefeller Initiative, will be submitted in early January, along with a very substantial amount of media appearances on shows. Now, as well as press releases and a lot of other stuff. It's going to be very coordinated. It's going to be very intense. It's going to hit, and it's going to hit hard. Now, why the second petition at all? This is very important for people to understand. The strategy is this. The White House put out a petition on November the 4th, which we need to elaborate on. A researcher in the OSTP was asked to write essentially the response. I do not think this person has any ill intent. I don't think the person knows that much about the subject, but he had to write up something. John Holdren, the head of the OSTP, almost certainly signed off on it. We don't know if the president signed off on it. It comes out, and they did something that I didn't think they might do, but I'm happy they did. They took the extreme hard line. They could have written a response that left a lot of room for nuance, a lot of room for them to handle questions or further advocacy, but instead they extreme hard line and stated, as you can go and read this, if you simply go to whitehouse.gov, go to We the People, look at the responses they've given, find the one to the disclosure petition, and you can read it. They said, this is their current position, there is not and never has been any evidence for life outside the planet Earth, period, or that any non-human intelligence has engaged the planet or anyone on it, or that the government has hidden anything from the public. This is an extraordinary statement in 2011 to make. It is completely indefensible and completely wrong, which makes it an extremely easy target. But what's important here, understand, there are petitions out there on various websites, various organizations, NGOs that have issues, and some of them have 200,000 signatures. But they had no impact from it. Why? Because they're off on a website somewhere. This stuff is all playing out on the White House website, the website of the most powerful nation in the world that gets millions and millions of visitors a month. And when they go there, they see these petitions there, and the next one they're going to see is the disclosure petition to the Rockefeller Initiative. What that petition is designed to do is to hammer down the point that that there is evidence, right, engaging this issue, and it even involves members of government. And so it's putting right in front of the public and the press who go to these sites as well, wait a minute, they say there's absolutely no evidence. What about this? And so we're in a perfect position to create this comparison between the White House's position and what's known out on the government's own website. And so the Rockefeller Initiative petition is pretty cool. What it does, it basically says, well, we petition President Obama to demand a formal investigation by the United States Congress of the effort by Clinton friend Lawrence Rockefeller to get Bill Clinton to release the UFO files, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, between 1990 and 1996. And furthermore, the petition actually gives the websites where you can actually go and get the proof of all of this that happened, the actual documents obtained from the OSTP right on the web, right on the website, at Grant Cameron's site and my site, ParadigmResearchGroup.org. And then furthermore, on the petition, in the petition information on the website, it names names. It says those that knew about this effort and were involved in it included President Clinton, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta, former Clinton advisor, former co-chair of the transition team for President Obama, John Podesta, Albert Gore, the vice president, and close Clinton friend Bill Richardson, now governor of New Mexico. These names are named right on there. And so now, if that petition were to get 25,000 signatures in the 30 days after it is submitted, the White House is going to have to respond to that. And let me tell you, I don't want to be the staffer that has to write the response of the Obama administration to that petition. And so here's the deal. It's going to be resubmitted in early June. It's going to have a whole bunch of media attention. By the way, the first disclosure petition, along with Robert Salas's petition, the two got 17,000 signatures. Those petitions, we'll call them the disclosure petitions, got more media coverage than all of the other submitted petitions combined. Hundreds of articles all around the world in dozens of languages, as well as a lot of radio and television coverage. That's significant. Now, this next one could get even more. And so if we hit hard, and the people out there that want to know the truth about this subject, they, according to the polls, they number somewhere around 150 million in the United States. The number of people that believe the government's lying runs around 240 million. If these people will hit that petition hard and start racking up those signatures, we will get the ultimate test of the administration. They will only have several options. One, to have the site break down again, right? Two, to raise the limit, and make it retroactive, which they didn't do before, which allowed us to get that response. I don't think they'll do that. Or three, pull the whole site down. If they don't, and the site is working, there is no reason whatsoever why Disclosure Petition 2 Rockefeller Initiative will not get those 25,000 signatures, in which case we have reached a watershed moment in history on this subject. Because you see, they have a problem. They can't say it never happened. The documents prove it did. They can't say that the people mentioned weren't. Documents prove they were. And the press, the editors and the reporters now have a license to go and ask questions about this, because it is not playing out in the fringe or in the far, outer realms. It's playing out on the White House website itself. It is a mainstream event, and therefore they can cover it. This is what's going on. This was the strategy for the beginning. And so I'm saying, hey, let's go for it and see what we can do.
If I were an Obama staffer, Steve, I actually don't think it would be that difficult a response for them to craft. I mean, with respect, I was encouraged. I liked the petition that you put together with, regarding the OSTP and the Clinton Initiative. Most people are not very aware of the fact that from 1993 to 1996, that Lawrence Rockefeller, who was a major supporter of Bill Clinton's presidency, with a strong interest in UFOs, and keep in mind, the Rockefeller estate, primary estate, was located in the Hudson Valley of New York, where in the early 1980s, a lot of UFO sightings were occurring. If a UFO flies over my house or yours, it may not be able to do a whole lot about it, but if your name is Rockefeller, in any case, yes, it's true that Lawrence Rockefeller did press the Clinton White House on a number of occasions during those 3 years for some kind of forward motion on the issue of UFOs in terms of an investigation. But the fact is that the records of the Office of Science and Technology Policy are available. And all the Obama administration has to do is to say this was in interest that Lawrence Rockefeller expressed to the Clinton White House, that and the reality is that from what we can see, no one in the Clinton White House really wanted to press this matter forward. Not Jack Gibbons, who was very prominent there at the time. He was science advisor. No one no one wanted to. So all the Obama people have to say is they looked into it. We didn't really find anything of value, and all the records are available for anyone who wants to read them. Case closed.
May I respond? All right.
Yeah, please.
Here is their dilemma. Okay, first of all, I mean, it wasn't private. It was being conducted in the OSTP using taxpayers' dollars, point one. Point two.
Sure.
So
it was privately initiated. We could say by Lawrence Rockefeller, really.
Yeah, but I mean, this was not some private consulting thing they were doing for him. I mean, they were engaging the issue. And let me tell you a little story. I think you know this, Richard, but the listeners may not. When Lawrence Rockefeller initially approached the OSTP, meaning a letter was sent, the initial approach, there might have been a private phone call that we'll never know about, but the formal initial approach was a letter from Lawrence Rockefeller's lawyer, Henry Diamond, that arrives in Gibbons' office in late March of 1993. Now, Gibbons didn't want anything to do with it. I mean, nobody should be shocked at that. But somehow in the interchanges that took place, and I understand that the 1,000 pages of documents that Grant Cameron obtained under FOIA filing do not possibly represent the entire amount of interactions that took place, right? There were certainly phone calls, who knows how many, and there may have been documents that are not in those files. But right away, Lawrence Rockefeller, and I think this is a brilliant strategic move on his point, and I've had this confirmed by people that were involved directly in this, firsthand witness testimony. He said, I'm seriously considering putting a full-page ad in every single newspaper in the United States. Not just a few, not the New York Times, Washington Post, all of them, all 4,000 or 5,000 of them. And I ran the numbers on that, and it would have cost roughly, in 1993, about $30 million. And guess what? He could have handled that without even breaking a sweat. And the moment that they learned that he was considering doing that, they said, "Oh, no. Let's don't get ahead of ourselves here. Don't do that. Let's look at this." All right, fine. So they look at it. Well, there were studies done. A number of researchers met at Rockefeller's ranch to do strategy sessions. Bill and Hillary Clinton went to his ranch and met with him in 1995 and talked about this issue. We have confirmation of that, including a photo of her walking on his property with Paul Davis's book in his hand about, Are We Alone? The philosophical implications of extraterrestrial contact. All right. We have documents confirming that her office was being kept abreast of this and was reviewing some of the material that was being done. All right. This was a non-trivial enterprise that went on for 3 years. But here's where it gets interesting. Not a single member of the executive branch, including Clinton and Podesta and Richardson and Gibbons and Panetta, have ever said a single word publicly about it. Like it never happened at all. And the press never covered it. And so when the Obama administration responds to this, the press is going to say, well, why didn't you talk about it? Why hasn't anybody spoken to this that it happened? Hillary Clinton once had a friend come over to the White House, and they did a little role playing where she would kind of talk to the ghost, I guess you could say, or the deceased Eleanor Roosevelt. It's kind of a way to get a sense of what she might want to do as First Lady, and the press went nuts. I mean, there were articles all over the world about this, but she and her husband engaged. By the way, they did take action. As part of the response to this process, that's when Bill Clinton asked Webster Hubbell to look into the UFO issue at Justice. Not only at Justice, Hubbell called up the SAC headquarters about this. And he confirmed this in his book, Friends in High Places, right? So this was actually a pretty significant thing going on, and I believe that Clinton would have liked to have done it. But obviously, we know what happened to the Clinton administration. He got embroiled in every conceivable scandal you can imagine and was attacked from every direction like no president we've probably ever seen. So, again, if I'm the staffer trying to write about this and I tell the press, well, it was no big deal, what? Or, nobody's ever talked about it, but, ask. I mean, if they try to say, look, this was nothing, then the press and the political press, who I know pretty well, are going to say, are you kidding? You spent 3 years on this? working on a project submitted by a close friend, and not just anybody, but a billionaire Rockefeller, and you're saying it's nothing? And you're saying that, well, the document's been out there. Why haven't you talked about them before? And what did John Podesta tell you during the transition when you were picking the government? John Podesta called for the release of all the UFO files twice, October 22nd, 2002, October 23rd, 2003. And then you make him the co-chair? Did you discuss the ET UFO issue at all?
Well, it's true, but okay.
You see where I'm going. Yeah,
I do see where you're going, and there's a tremendous value in researching this initiative historically. It's something I'm working on myself, and I agree with you that this is important, and that there's a lot that is likely there. However, in the files that are publicly, this is not really a smoking gun of U.S. Government cover-up on UFOs, and also, you know, the tactic of how does the media sort of confront the Obama administration? That's very difficult to do when you're dealing with two presidential administrations ago. What you have to do is go individually after Panetta, after Hillary Clinton, after Al Gore, after Bill Richardson, and that's going to be tough. You try to get Hillary in an interview on that, and she'll get out of it. She won't. She'll give you whatever she needs to give you to get out of it. I recall on YouTube there was a couple of young people starting a Bilderberg group meeting on one occasion, which this is in 2008 when she was in the hunt for the presidency, and she her eyes got really wide, and she basically laced up her tennis shoes and ran the hell out of there. She didn't answer it. I don't think that she would answer anything to do with this. So in other words, the strategy would require a very comprehensive analysis of the OSTP at that time, and it can be done, and there's value to it. But I'm just saying, from the Obama administration's point of view, I don't really think it would be that difficult for them to try to swat this down. It would take you and myself and other people. I think you'd have a lot of people with you that would be persistent to try to force this issue. But realistically, I don't think that they'd have a whole lot to be worried about.
I think what we need to do is find out. In other words, one way we can find out is if the people in this country that listen to Joe's show and the hundreds of other shows, right, and you know how many there are. You've been on 100 of them or more, so have I. And we know some of them have audiences in the 3 to 4 million range. If the people out there that have been following this issue for all of these years are finally determined that they are tired of having this thing shuffled along or being misled about it, they want to know the truth about this. And I'll include in that God knows how many hundreds of thousands or millions of contactees there are. Then we have offered them and provided an opportunity where, without having to spend a nickel, they can go to the White House website. And if they already have an account there, and at least 12,000 do, they can sign the next petition in about 20 seconds. If they don't have an account, it takes about 3 minutes to open it, assuming the site's working well. So for 3 minutes of their time, they can go and sign this petition. Their first name and last initial will be published, along with a city and state or city and country if they're outside the country. Anybody in the world can sign this. That's already been confirmed. Right. We need 25,000 people who have been following this issue for years out of the hundreds of millions around the world that believe this is true. And even more who believe they're not being told the truth by their government, whether it's our government, the French government, the British government, to sign this petition. And we'll find out exactly how they're going to respond to it.
Well, right, we got to get to the 25,000 first. By the way, regarding people like Podesta and Bill Richardson, just going back to the OSTP thing for a second, those two strike me as the most openly pro-UFO people that, are named on this petition that you crafted.
That's right.
Podesta certainly has made a couple of public statements, and Richardson. But really, neither of them has gone all that far. When you really look at specific statements, they've been kind of tepid. Richardson did write the forward to sci-fi produced book on Roswell archaeological digs. I believe that was his forward. And it was a good one. But when he got cornered on national media, he backed the hell down.
Sure.
On this issue, he will not even remotely indicate that there's an actual government cover-up. The closest he came was in this initial press conference a couple of years ago, and he hasn't really approached that ever since. So I don't know. I mean, getting these people to speak is going to be not the easiest thing to do.
Well, Richard,
so you've got to create a very clear case to make it obvious to them that they're implicated in this.
Well, all the press has to do is go look at the documents, and they know they're implicated, right? And here's the interesting thing.
But it's not like anyone's saying, "Oh my God, they're here. What the hell do we do about it?" I mean, there's really not a whole lot.
But we're not talking about. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's basically it. I mean, none of the thing that's that's going to be public. That's going to bite them in the ass. I don't think. You remember the famous Sherlock Holmes book about the dog that didn't bark? Here's the point. Just anybody, right? Podesta was a key advisor to the president and went on to become his chief of staff. Hillary Clinton was the first lady. She ran for president and almost won, and now she's Secretary of State. Leon Panetta was his chief of staff. He knew everything that went on in the White House. He went on to become the head of the CIA and now Secretary of Defense. These are major people that knew about the initiative and have never talked about it. Let me assure you that there is not any other subject of magnitude that would have gone on like that if they had not discussed it or been asked questions. It would have been unprecedented. It would have been the equivalent of the press never asking a single question of Dick Cheney about the Iraq War. So, again, that's all truth embargo stuff. That's all kind of part of the standard operating procedure. And so they went ahead and said, fine, we'll just stick with the standard operating procedure. Maybe they didn't realize. Yeah. I like the idea of putting their names out there. And really it comes out to whether or not major media is going to corner these people. But
right.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. Major media's got to step up, not just alternative fringe media. It's got to be some of the big dogs out there have got to be able to apply the pressure.
And we have all kinds of opportunities. Look, if we don't get any signatures, forget about it. But if we get 25,000, fast paced to get 25,000, we're going to get a lot of media coverage of this. And when I say media coverage, I'm talking major media. Look, the first disclosure petition. 8 days in, when it only had it was like 10 days, and we had 7,000 signatures, was written up on a front page 4-column article in the Wall Street Journal, for crying out loud, right? I mean, they are paying attention. Now, and what they had then was simply the disclosure petition calling on the president to acknowledge the extraterrestrial presence. Pretty straightforward. We know they had an easy response there. This time, when they see a bunch of signatures up there, it's not on something like that. It is on a specific evidentiary-based issue involving some of the most powerful people in the world. Now, will they have the guts to approach them? And by the way, they don't have to approach them directly. You see, the Defense Department has briefings all the time by, of course, their press representative. And they can ask questions to, quote, Panetta via that means by that network. The same thing for the Department of State. Any one of the press covering state can ask a question of the State Department spokesman about, was Hillary Clinton really involved with the, in engaging in this effort to get Bill Clinton to release all the files back in 93 to 96, and why hasn't he spoken about it? Of course, they also speak. They can be approached directly. Bill Clinton, of course, all over the place. And he's being...
Well, I'm going to jump in and agree. I mean, look, I mean, I hope you realize, I'm sure you do, that I'm not really disagreeing even philosophically with the idea of doing this, but I just see it as a really cool. But I will add that, regarding Bill Clinton, I've chatted with a gentleman who knows Bill Clinton, and in fact, they're somewhat family friends, not tight, but he chatted with Bill Clinton at a party in the late 1990s. Bill Clinton was still president during his second term. And this individual who had a very strong interest in UFOs, also in freedom of information, basically thanked the president for helping to promote more open FOIA regulations, which at the time he had done. And then followed up and was deftly able to raise the matter of UFOs indicate his interest in that. And Clinton apparently took the hint, and he said, this is pretty close to a direct quote, yeah, I really wish I was able to do more about that issue, but I can't.
Yeah, he said the similar thing to Sarah McClendon, right? He said a similar thing to Sarah McClendon. And so this raises an interesting situation. And by the way, Richard, I understand. You know I know your position on this very, very well. We're doing point and counterpoint for the audience.
Sure.
They see these things fleshed out like this. One of the interesting things that intrigues me about the White House response to the first disclosure petition on November the 4th, which I hope all the listeners go and read. By the way, there is an information page tracking all of this, and that is my petitions, and that's disclosurepetition.info. And then, as you know, they can learn more about the petition you all submitted at disclosurepetition.com. But at disclosurepetition.info is where the direct link will go up for them. You can see media coverage, YouTube videos have been created, blah, blah, blah. All of that there. And the hundreds of articles that were created about the first time around. All right. But here's an interesting speculation. And I know, Richard, you'll agree, at least in terms of my background on this, is that we know that some time ago, this issue, which is managed deep within the military intelligence community, essentially just pod separated from the White House and the Congress. They don't have access to it. I don't think there's a person in the Congress that could get to see a dead body or a craft or anything else. They don't even know where the bases are. They don't know anything. The president has been cut out. They don't get briefed. They're not involved. And so for the Congress or the president to take any action without access to the information from, quote, the military intelligence world where this is managed is very difficult. And so their hands are tied. That's what Clinton was trying to say. And so along come 2011, right? The death that has called for the release of the files. He becomes Obama's transition chair. And when they released the White House visitor logs about 90 days in, it turned out Podesta was the single most person that had the single most number of visits to the White House during those first 3 months. Clearly, Podesta has told Obama, and Obama is aware that Podesta was involved in the Rockefeller Initiative and called for the release of these files twice, 2002, 2003. But again, how do they move forward? There's no question that if Obama were to somehow be the disclosure president, it'd be one of the greatest things of all time. But how do they move forward? They can't get the information. And so what happened? Suddenly they put a petition process up, knowing full well they were going to get some petitions on the UFO ET issue, right? Just like they knew they were going to get a bunch of marijuana petitions. They got about 26. So they knew this. And then while they did raise the bar, they didn't make it retroactive. So they knew they were going to have to respond to this one. And they put out this absolute indefensible hardline response that was guaranteed to set it up for me. It was like they threw me a slow-pitch softball.
Are you saying that they actually crafted such a lame-ass response so that they're like pitching you a softball so you could hit a home run out of the park?
What I'm saying...
I'm not buying that. I don't buy that.
Let me finish the point. I don't know if this is the case. I'm just putting it out there because it's intriguing to me. I'm just saying is that if you are the White House, which is in the standard position where you cannot get access to information on this in hard sources, you can't get it from within the military intelligence community, you don't have a need to know, all right? And so what do? You're sort of stuck in quicksand. When you're stuck in quicksand and you're sinking, you ask somebody for a rope. And so by taking this tact, they have opened the door, in my view, to create a media firestorm if any of the media start looking at these documents and comparing to this extraordinarily hardline position. And so what happens is if they trigger a media firestorm, then essentially the White House gets around the problem of getting that information because that storm is going to sweep the Pentagon. It's going to sweep over to the CIA and the people involved are non-trivial people, right?
The assumption is that they want to move forward.
They're asking us, they could be asking us to come in and help them. Now, but even if that's not what they intended to do, I'm suggesting that's exactly the way it could work out.
It could work out. Look, there's absolutely at all times the potential for a real firestorm on this issue. But in my view, there is no way in hell that the Obama administration wants to promote that. Not at all. Not in the least. first of all, in terms of policy, there's really no substantive difference between them and the administration that preceded them on a whole array of key important issues. And think of it this way. I mean, what would have happened, really, if the Obama White House had given a truly appropriate, that is, truthful answer to the petition that you put out there? In other words, what if they had said, well, actually, there are a number of UFO reports that we really cannot explain that do appear to affect national security. Holy smokes! If they do that, they are an inch away from a true runaway effect. Like the train's going to run away, and they will not be able to control it.
All hell would broke loose.
Even so far as that's right, they don't. There's no way they want that, especially in the ramp up to an election year. Absolutely no.
But let me comment, Richard.
So the only answer they could give is this lame one that they put out.
But if they had done that, yes, all hell would have broke loose, and they would have been seen as essentially triggering this. That would have created significant internal stress by taking the extreme hard line. In a sense, their claim with all of the national security people that are still of the mind that they don't want this out. Well, you have done the best you could, but by taking the extreme line, they have created a situation where they're forced to come forward if the media firestorm starts. But let me get back to something even more important. You talked about comparing the two administrations. All right, let's do this for a second. I want everybody take a mental moment here and just quickly recall the 8 years under George Bush. Just take a moment. Just remember those 8 years, all right? You got it fixed. Now let me make a few points. A lot of people don't know this. When the OSTP was able to release to Grant Cameron, and a couple other people got some documents from the OSTP, similar documents, including Bruce McAbee, but none of them got as many as Cameron because he crafted perfectly done FOIA. When those they were only released because the OSTP, under the protocols of the White House, was not under the Presidential Records Act. Because if it had have been, they couldn't get, you can't FOIA, quote, documents. They have to go through the presidential records process and are only available a certain number of years, I think it's 12, after the president's. But it was exempt from that, and so they got those documents out. Okay, fine. And that was 2000. George Bush wins the election in November 2000. He takes office within 60 days. You know what he did? First of all, he amended, under executive order, the Presidential Records Act to make it even harder to get stuff out and allowed it to extend to his father when he was vice president. In other words, he shut it down, but he did something else. He shoved the OSTP out where it was and back under the Presidential Records Act, so Grant Cameron couldn't have filed another FOIA, right? And, of course, we know what then happened after that. One of the most secretive administrations in all of history. Now, let's look at the Obama administration. What does he do? Well, first of all, he hires as his co-chair a guy who was involved in the Rockefeller Initiative and just a couple years prior had called for the release of all UFO records. He makes him the transition co-chair. Then, during the campaign, he makes a big deal out of open, transparent government. On the second day
during the campaign.
During the campaign, but on the second day of office, Richard, what did he do? He signed a presidential directive calling for the expansion of the FOIA.
But in practice, there has not been a noticeable change in FOIA responsiveness under Obama.
But he did something else. He pulled again. But a lot of things happened in this administration, but let's acknowledge the fact are that he presidential directives that were directly applicable to open, transparent government and expanding access to government in the first day. He didn't have to do that. He did that, but he did something else. He pulled the OSTP out from under the Presidential Records Act where Bush had shoved it so that you could file FOIAs against it. That's interesting. And now, 3 years into the administration, after he has had the holy crap kicked out of him, right, because the Republicans basically burned the house down on the way out, took all the money, right? And then attacked him unmercifully, tried to make him, make everybody feel he caused it all. 3 years into that, as he goes to the next election, he puts a petition process up on the White House website, generating thousands of petitions and a whole lot of media, including massive media directed at this issue. Now, I would suggest that is a substantial difference than the 8 years under George Bush.
Stephen, we could do all this for hours because I could, and I don't even have a website in front of me, my friend. Okay? Any president that is able to literally to kill an American citizen without trial, as one writer recently put it, it's not a president, but it's a king. And President Obama has that capability. He's done many, many things that have gone in exactly the wrong direction in terms of preservation of American liberties. You're pointing out a couple of important things. I will grant that. But frankly, you could look at the other side of that. There are many, many things that Barack Obama has done that make him look exactly like the third term of George W. Bush. So, no, I would take, I don't think that that's really our purpose for tonight's discussion. But I am, I allowed myself about a week of thinking in the first term of Obama that maybe we're going to have some change. Sadly, I was under that delusion, and that delusion ended. So I don't have that. Anyway, be that as it may, I do not see. There has been all of this talk and so much of it nonsense. Let us say this over the last 3 years of an impending disclosure by the Obama White House. And this is not by you, Stephen. This is by other people who consider themselves or call themselves researchers, self-proclaimed. There's going to be a disclosure. It was going to happen at the end of 2009. This is absurd based on whatever kind of non-existent phony inside information that there was. And of course, it wasn't going to happen. There's no motivation and there's no evidence. In fact, all the evidence, as I see it, is on the other side of it, that Obama is locked out of the true information. I heard this from one. I'm sorry, what's that, Joe? I can barely hear you. What?
Oh, no, I said he's the first term. That's why. Go ahead, we're going to go to break. So you wrap up.
Yeah, we've been going out for 1 solid hour. He's not getting any ads in. We're gonna break Joe's bank here for not care.
Actually, no, y'all. I'm telling you, this is an interview that George Norrie will be jealous over. And somebody wrote to me, you said 2 words. I said, yeah, well, I have to say anything. I was loving this. This is one of the best interviews I've ever heard. This is like listening to somebody else's interview. It's excellent. Y'all are actually doing a fantastic job. But anyway, we're gonna take a break quite quick. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we got questions stacking up, but still we'll let Richard do come back to what Steven just said, and then we'll take some questions. Maybe we might take some. Anyway, y'all please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, if I can find a mouse, we'll be right back.
Okay, Richard, are we still...
You're listening to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Y'all are talking and one of them comment. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to UFO Undercover. This is your host, Joe Montalvo. I'm speaking with Richard Dolan and Steven Bassett tonight. Now, y'all both should be familiar with. If not, just put your head down in shame, okay? I don't care if you're just like 6 weeks in the field. Put your head down in shame. You should know both of these guys. Really and truly, when it comes right down to it, they're like two sides of the same coin, and which I personally love because I learned a lot from both of them over the years. And they've both been a good assistance to me over the years, helping me get things going. So, I have to tell them both thank you. I got them both in the air. Besides that, I really, especially about what we're talking about tonight, I don't know how many more people in the field really know much more than they do about these particular subjects. We were talking about alien abduction or other things, maybe not. But in this particular areas, I really do think that you've probably got, I hate using the word experts because I don't know if there's any such thing in ufology, but we're going to come right down to it. They probably are the two most experts in what we're discussing tonight. So, Richard, Steve, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. It's been a wonderful hour. I love talking with Richard. We need to do this more often.
Oh, this is fantastic.
Yes, much more often, Stephen.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, while I'm on this subject, we got a new show coming up. It's a variety show I'm going to be hosting. I'm cutting UFO Undercover to 2 nights a month just for special friends and newbies. And I'm doing another show, it's just a variety show, Changing America, that comes on 2 times a month. And really, y'all would both be perfect for this show.
Now, Joe, when you say variety show, is this like singing and dance? What are we talking here?
No, we're talking. I needed some freedom because politics get me in trouble on UFO Undercover. Because really, it's not a political show. And boy, I got to be honest with y'all. I will get emails like hate mail. What are you talking about? I'm like, whoa. I'm sorry we brought his name up. It gets a little violent sometimes. So I needed some freedom. And then over the Paranormal Radio Network over the last 10 years, I've been learning a lot about paranormal. So I've got some keen interest. I don't want to say insight, but some interest. So I'd like to explore that a little bit too while I'm hosting UFO Undercover. And so it's going to give me personally more freedom. And some of my guests, frankly, could use a little bit more freedom in the topic matter, to be honest with you. That's why I was thinking about y'all too. Stan Friedman too. I mean, there's certain topics we get into that really are ufology related, but do tend to carry over more into what I would call everyday life. And it should be interesting. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to get hated right up there. You never know.
I think ufology has become really a lot more of a freewheeling type of field in the last decade or two anyway. So, one of the things...
Well, that's something I talked about with you at the very first X conference I ever attended. I got about how the newbies at the time, Richard was a newbie anymore, but not a newbie, we were close to it, on how they're going to, the new people coming in, we're going to be changing the field in dramatic ways. And let me tell you what, they have. And I have to say mostly for the better. Not always, okay, mind you, but mostly it has been for the better. I mean, I've seen a lot of positive changes in the field. I mean, I've seen some stuff that, frankly, I wish would go away, and I'm not sure how we'll ever get rid of it, but all in all, I have seen a much more positive attitude, and most people now, I know when I talk about this in my personal life, or anytime we get a local mention in a local paper or something down here, they don't treat us like nutters or crazy people. They're like, wow, really? You have an interest in this? What can you tell me? Or they'll start telling me about something they've experienced or seen. So I got to say, it's been interesting.
All right, then. Well, get us on your variety.
Oh, I'll get you. That's Linda. She does do all the booking. Y'all know I'm not doing none of that. She's much better at that than I am. She's really good at booking, and she always gets some very interesting guests, I have to say. She's not here right now, so we can talk about it. Anyway, I'm getting off this topic before I get myself in trouble. A couple of questions came in. I'm going to get those, and then Richard had talked to me about something at the break, and then I'm going to give Steven a chance to talk about one other thing. But the first question comes in. This is Marsha. She lives in Washington, D.C. She says she is a lower secretary at the Pentagon and wants to know why we don't take a much more simple approach, meaning why don't we just ask for them to release any documents with the word UFO, extraterrestrial, alien, or any of these things mentioned in them? Since we do know these exist and they cannot deny that they do have documents with these words in them, why don't we release them? Who wants to go first?
Let's offer a quick thing. I mean, look, this has a long history. The Freedom of Information Act has had its ups and downs over the years, more downs than ups, I would say. I don't know if a lot of people realize, but to this day, we're approaching the year 2012 here, and of the several thousand UFO-related documents that we now have that have been declassified by the United States government over the years, still more than 50% of all of those documents come to us from 4 years of one single U.S. administration, and that is the presidency of Jimmy Carter. In other words, we shot the load from 1977 to 1981, and we've been trickling it out ever since. And we need to ask ourselves, why is that so? Even in the glory era of the Carter administration, getting UFO documents out was never a slam dunk. It was always difficult. There's a nice picture of Stanton Friedman back in those days, famously holding up one of the NSA released documents. It's all completely blacked out. So what's in there? The government can tell us that UFOs aren't really a big deal to them, but they have continually withheld these documents. I think this secretary of the Pentagon's got the right type of an approach, the right kind of a question. But the answer is, well, of course they won't do it, because in reality, this is a topic that affects national security in a very profound way. If for no other reason, then we have a long history of our fighter jets being to intercept these things, whatever they are, and typically failing to intercept them, and typically being vastly outperformed by them. So ask yourself, why would any government openly acknowledge that this is going on again and again, especially if that government is called the United States government, which is trying to be the hegemon over the whole world? They don't want to acknowledge that. So, and that's just the beginning, because the truth is, to really open up this UFO issue opens up everything. It turns everything upside down. One thing I would love to chat with Steven about before we leave this is, what do we think the world might look like after disclosure? Steve's, got the book that I wrote with Bryce Abel on it, but I would really like to talk with Steven about this before we're done here. But I just think it would turn things upside down way too much, and also ultimately threaten the exposure of a deeply clandestine structure of power that I've come to call a breakaway civilization. And I just don't see any motivation within the structured power as it is to change that at all. They have too much to lose. That's my short answer.
Let me add something there, Joe. The FOIA law from the beginning, and we have a lot of this in the U.S. because we're not a totalitarian state, not yet at least. The FOIA law was, to some degree, window dressing. There was the fact that we had it, and you could file these things and get some information, was very comforting. It showed that the government was not trying to be obsessively secretive, and that it wasn't a world apart, that they served us, and these things are public documents and so forth. Okay, fine. So people would file FOIs, and they would get information. But what people failed to understand, a lot of people did, is that the way the law is structured, the government is not going to give you anything it doesn't want to. There's nothing here in this law that says that if they find something that has the stuff you're looking for, they have to give it to you. Not at all. That's the stuff that theoretically they could give to you, because that's what you want. That doesn't mean they will. And when it comes to national security stuff, you're not going to get it, period. So a lot of people developed a certain, how would you say, they became too comfortable with the status quo here, when in fact it's totally in favor of the government in terms of national security. This is one example. There are other. The SETI program was set up initially, quote, to make people comfortable with the fact that the government did care about extraterrestrials, and they were trying to find them, looking for signals. It was totally a ruse, totally a propaganda move. The government knew there was ETs long before SETI was ever even set up. So there's a lot in our society where the people are sort of given something to make them feel comfortable about the status quo, but in fact, what they're given does not really fully serve social contract. And this is something we need to end in America if we want to have the nation that we think we have and that the Founding Fathers wanted. So the FOIA, interesting, but trust me, it's not key. Now, interestingly enough, though, Grant Cameron had a breakthrough there when he got those 1,000 documents. And to this day, I don't fully understand why he got them. It may have been a mistake on the part of the people in the OSTP. It may have been because it was known, even though there was almost no press coverage. There were a couple of articles. This was not a cover-up. It wasn't hidden. The press didn't cover it. And so it would have been awkward if they had said, oh, there's nothing here. It could have been deliberate, or it could have been because it mostly involved, I guess you could say, this kind of effort by Rockefeller to get a report to the president, get a letter and so forth, and not, deep dark UFO secrets. Who knows? But he got them, right? And I believe that the moment that they turned up in Grant Cameron's box, the stage was set. The things were put in motion, leading to where we are now. because I believe the Rockefeller Initiative is the Achilles heel in the truth cargo. That ultimately this initiative, barring something else happening, which obviously disclosure can come from any number of directions, including a dozen other countries, but assuming that doesn't happen, the Rockefeller Initiative may be the key to the door. That this is the event, this is the circumstance. Because of Grant's work, and of course he has a huge narrative about all this at presidentialufo.com, which of course we have that link on the petition site and in the White House website. This information ultimately triggers the media storm we're talking about. So Rockefeller, even though he was sliding into dementia by 96, it's very difficult for him to work. His family was not behind him at all. I mean, the rest of the Rockefellers, his daughter told me personally that she supported him, but the rest of the family wanted nothing to do with this, and they didn't want him into this. And so he basically slides completely out of it from 96 forward, and then he dies. But he may have, in fact, planted the seed that grows up through the sidewalk and breaks the sidewalk open and gets us through the disclosure door. This is my thinking right now. And frankly, the only thing that prevents this from happening would be the unwillingness or the lack of commitment on the part of the American people who want the truth of this, who, for whatever reason, don't feel it's worth 3 or 4 minutes of their time to open an account with We the People, get a password, click a verification link, go and sign this petition when it goes active sometime in early July. If we get those signatures, 25,000 minimum.
You mean January?
In January. In January, absolutely, early right. January. Yeah. We get those signatures. I'm telling you, we have a very interesting situation. And if we were to get 100,000 signatures, wow! I mean, we're talking a major global media story. So it's up to the people at this point. This was all White House. I didn't have anything to do with that. They handed us this gift. My job was to accept the gift, unwrap it, right, and put it together and put it out there for people to play with. We've done that. It's there. Every day more people know about this than knew about it on September 22nd when we started. And so the question is, do the people want the truth? Do they believe they have a right to it? Do they believe they have a need to know? And are they tired of being run around in circles on major issues of war, peace, and the very nature of reality? If they are, then for goodness sake, sign the petition.
Well said.
Thank you, sir.
Agreed. Look, the tool is, the Freedom of Information tool, I agree with you also, it's certainly no magic bullet. Although the theory of it is absolutely critical, as you had pointed out, to the functioning of a true social contract. And the petition, too, although I still think it's totally half-hearted and more PR than anything else, still it's a tool as well, and the public has it available. And, I completely agree. We have an obligation as citizens to do our utmost to utilize that tool to try to make an unresponsive government responsive to us to the maximum extent possible. So, yeah. We need to hammer this issue. I'm glad that you're continuing with the petition, Stephen. And Bryce and I, or either Bryce or I, or however we're going to do it, in the future we'll still do more petitions. But, for right now, it's not my interest with another petition right on the heels of the first one. But this may be something that he and I, or I alone, will do in the springtime, and we'll just hash that out.
Well, the listeners need to understand that you are a researcher. You're writing books. You're a researcher. Bryce Abel is a playwright. He's a producer, director, a scriptwriter. He's a very
exactly. And to do the petition, even though look, you can craft the petition and then sort of sit back and let the people vote. Well, not really, because it takes effort to promote it, to keep on it. And I'm writing a new book right now, and I've got a whole variety of other projects that I think in the long run are going to be quite valuable to the field of ufology and to moving this issue forward. So we have to choose our battles. And the act of writing a book I can tell you, it requires a lot of solitude. You have friends who want to email you, Rich, how come you haven't written back to me? Well, the reason is because if I'm trying to write a book, I just can't do that. I can't be as public as sometimes I would like to. And when I'm in a phase, which is writing a new book, well, that's just how it is. So I'm glad that we did this petition. Certainly we didn't get as many signatures. You've got just under 3,000. We're just under 2 on this, and I know under different conditions it could have been better. Nonetheless, I'm glad we did it. I think it was really good for raising this issue, and we can raise it again. But I've got a book to write.
And then in terms of our different perspectives, as a researcher historian, you have to maintain a higher degree of objectivity, skepticism, and conservatism to the subject matter. Sorry. Oh, now I'm getting a lot of feedback. Hang on.
Yeah.
Okay, that was weird.
A little bit. Yeah, that was
one of a ghost in the machine.
You know what? That was weird. I don't know what that was, Russ.
Yeah. Are you hearing me okay? You hearing me all right?
Am I getting feedback still? No, it's sort of...
I hear you're good now. You're good now.
Yeah, that was weird, guys. I'm not sure what that was. Y'all were going through it, and all of a sudden it freeze.
I'm a political activist.
You've been straightforward activist on this for good 15 years now, Steven. And I am a researcher primarily. That's really what I hope that I am first and foremost, is someone who approaches this topic with some detachment and without a preconceived idea on what direction I should be going one way or the other. Yeah. On the other hand, look, there's no one in their life, and certainly not myself, is ever totally detached from the world, and I've got opinions, and those opinions are fairly evident in a lot of things anyway. I certainly believe in the value of truth within our society, and I believe that we're not well served with a society that's built foundationally on a great untruth, or many great untruths, which I think that's what we're dealing with right now. So yeah, I'd like to see that corrected. So to that end, I definitely have a perspective on it, but to maintain the discussion the way I do, I do need to step back sometimes, be a little more objective, and not throw myself into the fray all the time. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, but not surprisingly, and I think most of the researchers understand this. This is not what, an historian can focus on the Civil War, and they can spend years writing books about the Civil War. Well, that happened 100 years ago. This is all happening in the now, and so you have the difficult task of addressing the incredibly important historical process that is happening virtually as you're writing, which is similar to what people do that are trying to write about the Iraq War. So it's very, it's if you have a lot of knowledge about an incredibly important thing that's happening, it's only appropriate that you're going to use that knowledge and speak up at times with respect to what's going on, because we are also all citizens. We're affected by government policies, and so there's nothing unusual about that. So you're kind of bouncing a little. You're getting occasionally move in the activist area a little bit, and you come back, but that's okay. I think that's understandable.
Well, I mean, when I broke into this field in 2001, and I know for sure at that time of anyone who was doing UFO research, I think I was perceived as one of the most activist and most politicized of the historians and writers on UFOs at that time. I still think that's pretty much true, but I also don't feel a need to throw myself or to dedicate myself, let me put it that way, into the political fray the way you've done, and I'm glad that you're doing what you do, and I have to pursue what I do. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I mean, we both really have similar overlapping interests in this. And, I'm interested in. Well, at some point, I'd like to hear your thoughts on our, what you think is going to happen,
right,
to our world once an acknowledgement is made or is forced out by the president or some other big shot who's got equal stature on the matter of UFOs/ET reality.
You mean post-disclosure?
Yeah.
Okay, you have to promise that you can't use any of this in a second edition of AD After Disclosure until I get my book written. Okay,
it's already been written, my friend. In fact, the second edition of AD
really
is we're done. I and Bryce did these revisions.
Y'all heard that right here, guys.
It's going to be out in the springtime.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, good. It's already done.
Whatever you say, it's we're not
edition.
plagiarizing a thing, man. We're done. we made a third edition.
Then we're all going to produce additional editions. After Disclosure, everybody's going to put out a new edition of their book, whatever it was, even if it was written 40 years ago. We're going to put out a new edition. Look, I think that what when you wrote AD After Disclosure, I assume that you were saying, okay, as an historian who looks at the past, I'm going to take an objective look at the future and say what is likely to happen. And you wrote that up, which is exactly what you would expect. When I think about post-disclosure, I am coming at it from the activist point of view. Now, what do I mean by that? What I'm most interested in are those things that could very well happen post-disclosure that justify the disclosure process itself, that provide the justification and the motivation to people to get this done, to get the disclosure event out of the way, to get the acknowledgement of the ET present by the world governments. So that's my focus. I'm less,
Welcome to Eye to the Sky, the UFO synopsis. Here's your host, Andrew.
Hello, everyone. Trish Sheridan, host of A Global Focus. Come join us each Friday evening at A Global Focus's new time, 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern.
A parapsychic radio show based out of New York City.
Join us each week as we journey into the unknown. Let's cross the threshold of reality together.
We take a fun and no-nonsense approach to our show, and we love to interact with our audience. Each week, you can expect a great guest, interesting topics, and strong opinions by myself and Stephanie,
as well as rapid readings, psychic dream interpretations, and the gemstone of the week. And don't ask us a question that you don't want an answer to.
Give us 2 hours of your time to inform, enlighten, and entertain you. Let the journey begin.
Join us. Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I see what that was. That was kind of weird. No, I hear myself. It's really
weirder by the second.
I know. Since we do this every week, I'm kind of wondering. Okay, now, do I hear myself anymore? No, all right. Steven, Richard, y'all hear me okay?
I hear you, Joe.
Okay.
I hear you, but we're getting feedback and other weird things, so.
That was weird. Let's see. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you two have to bear with us for a second because I'm not sure what I was going up there with Skype. We apologize for the weird interruption you had there. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. My voice isn't low anymore. I just had to get it where it belongs, and there we go.
All right. Well, I think we're good to go here. I think we're able to move ahead here.
Moving ahead. I was talking to a dead computer for a while, so I don't know where you lost me.
Did we just lose Joe? I heard a sound that sounded like he just dropped. It's just you and me, Steve?
It sounds that way.
No.
Well, people, obviously people understand that, well, maybe they don't understand. I mean, we could be doing this on a conference call, hard lines and all that, and there wouldn't be any of this. But people don't
someone
understand.
is saying that he can hear us.
Oh, really?
I got the message board right here, so they can hear us talking. And
Oh, that's
Joe
wonderful.
is out. Even you and I have the floor.
Oh, we do.
We don't have to share with Joe. So let me just ask you. You were talking about your thoughts on disclosure, and you were approaching it as an activist. And I'm personally curious because we've talked about a lot of things, but I really have not gotten your vision of how. Oh, here comes Joe.
Joe's coming back.
Wow, let me in there.
No, we're cool, Joe. You don't have to worry about it.
Oh, I know y'all can do this by yourselves. I know that. I'm not even worried about that part.
Yeah, Joe, go out to dinner or have a couple of drinks. We'll take it.
Look. Y'all were talking the first time I got up, made some coffee, walked around the house. Because I'm mobile now, I can hear it when I walk around. It's kind of nice. I'm not lazy, but that was just weird. But anyway, we're good. Everything sounds good.
Actually, we got this. So Steve was talking about his vision of disclosure, and I mean, if you don't mind, then I would like to hear the rest of post-disclosure. Exactly.
Well, as I was saying, if I'm Richard, I would, and I think that's what he tried to do with Bryce and ADF disclosure, I would try to objectively describe what he thinks would be the circumstances post-disclosure, which would be nothing but an opinion, but an informed one, and thousands of books are going to be written about this, I can assure you. When I look at post-disclosure, I look at it as an activist. In other words, I'm not interested so much in knowing the whole picture or trying to figure that out, which would give me a headache anyway. But rather, I'm interested in those things that I think are very likely post-disclosure, which are significant for the advocacy process itself, particularly in motivating people to press this forward, to get it done, to get the formal acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence. And there are a few things which are extremely impacting, and I'll address them now. Probably number one on the list. But actually, there's two that are right there together. They're right there at the top. And one is probably not bigger than the other. One is the worldview change that I think will take place. I think there's going to be a worldview change that will be, in some people, small, in other people, large, but almost no one will not see some change. That will be generally globally very positive. That it will alter people's thinking in such a way as to make certain avenues of reform and policy more possible. And the two fundamental changes in worldview would be and deal with what I call human space and human race. There will be an increased sensitivity to the concept of the Earth as our home, and the fact that it's our baby and we need to make sure it's not abused. And secondly, an increased consciousness of us as a species, as opposed to other non-human species. And I call that specialization. That's my word. Nobody gets that but me. I'm going to get that into Wikipedia. Whatever. The point is that specialization, that's with an E, not an A. These worldview changes are non-trivial, and they will have very subtle but powerful effects, even immediately after disclosure and then going on. That's number one. Number two is the technology. Since we decided to create 7 billion people on our way to 9, the whole idea that, gee, things would work out if we could just have a simpler life and we'd all maybe live more pastoral lives, maybe all get a little plot of land, plant a garden, whatever, and that things would work out. That ship sailed a long time ago. Unless we plan on shipping 3 billion people off planet in some kind of a, cruiser, battle. Mm-hmm. The point is that with the population that we have, we cannot solve our problems without significant technological enhancements and breakthroughs. It's you just can't do it. It's impossible. So we have pushed the limit in just about every one of the fundamental areas of human endeavor, including our interaction with the environment, to the limit. So we're facing all these multiple tipping points and all kinds of chaos and bad things. And we desperately need a technological breakthrough. And, and increasing, and keeping the pressure in your tires inflated properly is not enough. I mean, that's not going to quite do it. And we know enough about the ET issue to know that we have been investigating and studying ET-based technology for 60 years with billions of dollars in underground facilities, and we've made progress, particularly in the area of anti-gravitic propulsion. And so, and that leaves the other one, which is the big one, which is what have we learned about the energy systems of those craft? We know a little less about that. And we also know that every once in a while, somebody from the military intelligence world, the black ops world, gets a buzz going from a little too many cocktails, and always says something along the lines of, well, you know, whatever you see us with, whatever's out there, we're already 50, 60 years ahead of that. You know, right. Ha, ha, ha. And I'm going, you know, if we're given the trouble we're facing right now as a species, this idea that you've got technology 60 years ahead of what is the public domain, but you're keeping it to yourself, that's not flying anymore. And I use that pun intentionally. We actually need that tech. We need to have access to it in an appropriate way so we can address these problems. We're tired of this gap between the secret world and the real world here. And so I believe that there are technological breakthroughs of extraordinary implications. And if there's an energy breakthrough along the lines that a lot of pretty smart people, including government scientists who are aware of this issue, are talking about, it could transform the world in 10 years. And so I believe that a transformed world with breakthrough technology is a post-disclosure reality, but we're not going to get there until we have disclosure. And it's one of the major reasons why people should care, and they should be funding this advocacy work and getting this done before somebody blows something up or starts a war, and it's all going to get tabled like it was in 9/11 back in 2001.
Well put. And if I want to tack on what you said there was a person on the message board who really asked me if I would just describe my concept of a breakaway civilization, and it really dovetails very well with what you just said, Stephen. First of all, I would just say, excuse me, I agree with every point that you've made there. The only thing that I would add is that when disclosure happens, I see it as a really major political firestorm, and in large part, there's so many reasons why it would happen. I think, yes, there's a lot of opportunities for expanded consciousness, but in the immediate term, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for panic and people wondering, how safe are we? How unsafe are we? Who are these other beings? What's their agenda? Who's being abducted? Are there really nasty reptilian beings? And all of this. At the same time, there's going to be an understanding. It won't be hidden indefinitely that there has been not simply a clandestine non-human presence here on planet Earth interacting with humanity, but a clandestine human presence that has somehow been interacting with these other entities and interacting with us meaning the normal people, with technology that is vastly, vastly beyond anything that's supposed to exist. In other words, if you see what you think is a UFO, I think we can all realize it's a fair question to ask, is it one of ours or one of theirs? Because I think many of us looking into this realize that, as you just said, the black world, the clandestine world, could be half a century or more beyond what we have. A lot of indications do point to this. So, it got me asking myself, well, what is it even that constitutes a distinctive civilization? I don't know if anyone has a true definitive answer to that, but certainly one thing would be one's level of technology. Another would be your social structure. Another would be your cosmology or your understanding of yourself in the universe. And when I look at all of these things within the classified world, I think that they are different enough, distinct enough, that they really truly can be classified as a separate, distinct civilization that is broken off from our own, hence a breakaway civilization. And that this is a civilization that has developed radical technologies, radical breakthroughs, including almost certainly some form of electrogravitics, that is anti-gravity, that allows them to go off planet, and that very possibly, I would almost say probably, allows them to circumvent petroleum in some way or another. And petroleum is the key, because we live in a petroleum world. A world that, we love it and we hate it. We hate it more than we love it, but we need it as much as we hate it right now. Our entire global infrastructure is dependent on petroleum. And the answers within the UFO technology imply a non-petroleum source of power, whatever that is, whether it's cold fusion, whether it's controlled fusion, whether it's zero-point energy. I don't know what the true answer is, but it's not petroleum. And it promises to turn our world upside down. And this classified group, I am personally convinced, has answers here. I don't know if they have the whole answer, but they have a big part of the answer. And it's worth asking, do they consider it part of their mission or in their best interest ever to voluntarily enlighten the rest of the world on what they've got? And I think the answer is that they will never voluntarily do it. And I've always maintained that disclosure is inevitable, but it will never happen as a result of internal political initiatives until it's forced. I think it's going to be like a tidal wave. Public pressure is one part of it, which is why the petition process is so important. But I suspect that all of us are pawns in a much larger game, the game of destiny that's transforming all of us, whether we like it or not, into something totally different technologically in terms of our politics, our economy. Our world of today doesn't resemble the world of just 20 years ago, much less 30, 50 years ago. And I do believe that something's going to happen. Something like WikiLeaks, for example, which didn't exist 10 years ago, which couldn't exist 10 years ago, but which has changed so much of our world already and which promises to change more. Something's going to happen. It's going to force a secret out. And although it would be nice if the political powers that be were to take the initiative and to do this process rationally, I would like to see that. I don't have a whole lot of confidence they will. I think disclosure is going to be super messy, and it's going to take generations to resolve itself till we figure out what actually has been going on. I don't know if it's going to be fun for quite a while. I think maybe our great-grandchildren will finally look back and say, thank God it's all settled out.
Well, it's not like we're having a whole lot of fun right now.
No, good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people said it'll turn the world upside down. I would make the case the world needs to be turned upside down, but let me put this in another way. I think increasingly as the awareness of because thanks to the internet and the available to alternative information, some of which is ridiculous, but a lot of it's quite good. The world is increasingly aware of these variables and these equations. They understand the implication of energy, the cost of energy. They understand the environmental impacts and all that stuff. And the simple truth is that when you examine the nature of carbon-based fuels in the modern world, when you factor in the pollution, when you factor in the additives in gasoline, the effects on groundwater and so forth, millions of people every year are dying from the pollution effects of petroleum-based fuels and also petroleum-based products, because we decided, why waste it? Let's make everything out of it. And so every day that the truth embargo is maintained and we are not in the post-disclosure world, and where almost immediately some very hard questions are going to be asked about that technology, which would very likely lead to its emergence into the public domain. Every day that passes, there is a price being paid to maintain the embargo. During the Cold War, it was an easy price to pay. There were nuclear weapons pointed by the thousands, grave concerns about destabilizing the geopolitical equation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But after the Cold War ends, different ballgame. And so now the truth embargo is costing us unbelievable amounts of treasure, particularly. I believe, Richard and I disagree here. I believe that the issue is still managed in the military intelligence community, and that the people down there are patriots and good people by and large. That they're not being, quote, run around in these in their realms by oil executives, chasing them around, making them do things against their will. The oil executives, while they're all richer than God anyway, these people are down there, don't make a lot of money. They're not rich. They are serving the national security. Yes, they have separated in a way from the political process. But though on an individual basis, none of them were blamed for that. I mean, it was a massive process that took place a macro process. And so I don't blame them individually, and it took a long time for it to happen. But nevertheless, I believe that these people are very concerned about the fact that the cost of energy and the technological limitations we have are virtually destroying the United States and possibly even the planet, and that this has to change. And the simple truth is, and nobody's ever been able to persuade me otherwise, is that there is a direct link between the accessibility of these technologies and the disclosure and the truth embargo, the containment of the ET issue, that you can't have one without the other. You cannot bring these techs into play without ending that embargo. And so the embargo ends first, the tech comes later. And so that's a simple equation that I still feel stands. And so you can't know everything, and we can't predict everything. So if there is a reasonable prospect that ending the truth embargo leads to the technological breakthroughs that could resolve many, if not most, of the human dilemmas we face now, then going for disclosure is an absolute imperative. And people need to get on the ball. I mean, everybody's worried about their house, their pension, their job, their life because of pollution. They're worried about all of these things. And by and large, nobody is offering solutions that even remotely approach these problems. Just look at the current presidential primaries and the debates. I don't think anybody has said anything that even remotely is in the ballpark of addressing these issues. And so here is something that might actually take us somewhere profound. The question is, can people drop the veil from their eyes? Can they step out from under the truth embargo and the propaganda that's been with them since they were born and say, okay, enough of that. The White House has a petition process. I can sign a petition calling for disclosure. I can sign a petition demanding information. It could actually have an impact. It could trigger media response. Why on earth wouldn't I do that? And so again, it keeps coming back to, look, you don't want the paralysis of analysis. You don't want to end up spending your whole life trying to understand how the vast future is going to unfold before making a decision in the moment, right? We know this, that the human race is always going forward, not backwards. And so withholding the truth, denying reality, that's going backwards. And so ending the truth embargo is going forwards. So right away, that's a positive thing. That should tell us this is probably what we should do. Also, it's the truth. Generally speaking, right, massive efforts to create false realities don't get you anywhere good. I mean, history is pretty clear on that. If anybody's got an example, I'm interested in hearing it. On the other hand,
they won't last forever. They
just don't last.
Forever.
Yeah. So on these fundamentals, I think going forward with ending this truth embargo seems straightforward to me. But, some are not going to do it. But we don't need but 25,000 out of the 240 million people that believe the government's not telling the truth in this country, based on repeated polls. We need 25,000 of the 240 million to sign this petition in 30 days. That's it. It's that simple.
I don't know what y'all talking about. I love my government. I think they tell me the truth every day. Really? All right.
I'm glad for you, Joe.
I've actually heard people say that before, too, by the way. But, Rich, anything else you want to say to that? Because we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but I wanted to give you
just so much. Look, I certainly agree that there's a huge military component to this cover-up. I wouldn't deny that. I've spoken with a number of these people who I believe are military people who are involved in that, in fact. I just think that the dominant direction is not internal U.S. government related. I think it's not part of that system. It's the strings are pulled from the outside. And in fact, if you really look at U.S. policy over the last century, you can see that policy comes from the outside in. That is from big money, not from within the military. They don't make policy; they implement it. That's the only thing I'm saying. But there's people on the inside who do feel that we deserve more than to be spoon-fed BS for the rest of our lives. They certainly believe that. The question is, will we ever get to a point where we will have them enlisted as actual open allies in the fight for truth? And I think at some point that will happen when all of this starts snowballing. I think it'll be a very rapid process. And once they see that that there's light at the end of this tunnel, yeah, they will join in and they will contribute a great deal. I don't know when that'll happen, but it'll happen.
Well, as you know, Richard, almost every advance that we have made in civilization has primarily been the result of a very relatively small percentage of a particular group, civilization, nation, whatever, who are committed to going in a certain direction, and the rest go with them. This is the way it is. It's not 80% of the people say, "Oh, we got to go here," and it's also the case that a relatively small percentage of say a nation can take that nation in a bad direction. Right? This is the nature of these dynamics. Now, the internet may create a kind of reality where we have so much ability to, quote, interact, vote, or have, referenda, what have you, that we may actually see the internet making it possible for very large numbers of people to come to consensus and move things in a certain direction. And that's very likely. But prior to the internet, that just didn't happen. So the disclosure process right now, in my view, has achieved that basic percentage necessary to get this done. We don't need everybody on the train. There's enough room on the train anyway, right? We just need some people focused to go forward on this, and hopefully it's the right thing to do.